and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Welcome one and all to On Nature. I'm your host, Brian Porter. This is the show where we seek viable solutions to all the major problems on the planet. Sometimes are environmental. Tonight we're going to cover the whole gamut because I have one of the most amazing activists. I'm not sure he's well known on the Revolution Radio Network. He's a Canadian. He lives actually not far from me. I live in Toronto. He lives in a little town called Brantford. And his name is John Trumel. This guy has broken a record for running in elections. Is it 84, John?
I think it's 88 now.
88. Wow. Yeah. 88. That's incredible. I mean, that alone is just phenomenal, John.
87 losses.
Yeah, well, I mean...
And one tie.
I was going to say, did you ever get close to winning? There we go. We got that. No. John's involved in numerous legal battles with the federal and the provincial governments. We were just talking offline there before the show. I had no idea he was doing so much battling in courts, but we can get into that soon. He's got a case involving growing your own cannabis for medical purposes, and that's another important case he's involved in. He goes by the name The Engineer because he's one who's fighting to create a financial system that works for everyone, not just for the rich. And, so there's a good summary of some of what you've done in your life. John, did I miss any big items in there?
Well, I'm a professional gambler my whole career. I graduated systems engineering, and in my last year they started the mathematics of gambling course, and I took it. And this was in the era when they just discovered card counting in blackjack. So I started going on junkets and beating Vegas. And in 1975, I started the first university card counting team. There was a movie about the MIT university card counters in the late 80s, but I was in the mid-70s when it first started, taking on Vegas. And let's see, after running the biggest gaming house ever busted in history, it was, 28-table underground game with 155 employees. The OPP called it Project Robin Hood when they shut it down.
And you started this operation?
Yeah. I was then, I used to, when I got barred from playing blackjack in Vegas, since it was now a game of skill like poker, and you could play poker as long as there was no unfair rake off to the house, why not blackjack too? So I started running games where you could be the bank. And I got busted and convicted, but eventually I got acquitted. Well, next thing you know, I had 28 tables going where you could be the bank. But who wanted to be the bank against me? So nobody did very often. There was one U-Bank table and 27 ordinary tables. So I did okay. But after they busted that one, I was forced to go play poker in the United States. And I played for 5 years at the Taj Mahal, Trump Taj Mahal in Atlantic City, where I became known as the professor. Every game's got its professor, the guy who knows the odds. But I was known as the professor at the Taj Mahal from the Rounders movie, if you ever saw that movie.
I think I did see that movie.
They had one scene in there with the chandeliers and, in Atlantic City, and even recognized the dealer, Michelle. And one of my favorite lines was, he said, "We don't play together, but when was the last time you saw one piranha eat another piranha?" And it's actually true. For those who understand what's going on and how the game is played and what they probably have, it's it almost seems like we're playing together, but we're not. I just happen to know what the other good guy has, and we both happen to know what the bad guy has, and we can adjust our betting to milk him for the most. And that's absolutely righteously fair and a rush when you pull it off.
Wow. So, but you talk a lot about, your love of gambling and whatnot, but you have a very good heart. You're fighting for many good causes.
Well, back in 1979, I got tired of being busted for gambling. So I decided I was going to run for Parliament to legalize gambling. And that's when they asked me about inflation. And I said, how come my casino chips never lose their value and the government's chips lose their value year after year? What's going on? It's the same hardware. Must be a software problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I did an engineering analysis, and I figured out that if I were to charge interest on my poker chips when I lend them out, everybody gets 100 chips. They buy in, but they all owe me 110. Well, at the end of the game, it becomes a death gamble, a mort gage. Mort gage means death gamble in French. And when you promise to bring back 110 when they only lent you 100, you better get it off your neighbor and have him suffer the foreclosure, or it's you. So interest creates a competition to the death amongst the borrowers because there's never enough money in the game to pay off the debt that grew. Ta-da!
Hey.
So I said, gee, all we got to do is run money like poker chips, interest-free, and there'd be no inflation? Yup. So, as the only engineer in the country, maybe the world, specialized in the mathematics of gambling, having run my own casino bank, and having specialized in computers, and your bank accounts are all on computer now, I saw it as my engineer's duty to attempt to reprogram the bank's computers. So I kept running in politics about wanting to have interest-free money. Then I started attacking the banks in the courts, trying to get a declaration that interest was bad, trying to stiff the banks, showing people how to fight their foreclosures. And while you fight your foreclosure, you live in the house rent-free. Ta-da! My longest stiff was 33 months in Toronto. The Woodhouse family in 1993 who were evicted, and I kept them in their house for an extra 33 months before they got evicted. And that gives them time to build up their resources and do a move instead of just being on the street broke. So that was one fight, and then the last
How much did you charge him for your services?
No, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not allowed to charge. That would get me in trouble. I've been investigated several times by the Ontario and Quebec bars, and as long as I never charged, people's tough luck if they want to believe in a non-lawyer. And I happen to be pretty good. So,
well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, you have a very kind heart. The fact that, I mean, people get kind of like the wrong impression when you're saying, let's run the banks like you run a casino. Because
not like a casino
it's actually
bank.
a much more honest way of doing it.
Yeah, but not like a casino, but like a casino bank.
Mm-hmm.
Like poker chip. When you go to the poker game, anybody can run the bank. It doesn't matter. We all watch the money go in the box. We all watch the chips come out. We see the chips go back in, the money come out. Nobody can screw around with a poker bank, a casino bank. So I don't want to run a casino. The economy is the game, doing trades and business and stuff like that, and maximizing your return on how valuable your input is in a fair market. But you can't have a fair market if you got to pay back more chips than you got, which guarantees one guy's got to get knocked out every cycle.
Yeah. Well,
so it becomes an ugly game where rather than get knocked into poverty, people will lie, steal, cheat, kill. Do anything. It's called the Great Prostitution in Revelations of the Bible. And that's what we're living. Everybody is scared to lose their paychecks if they got one. And that's basically it. No one wants to rock the boat. The guys who run the money run the world.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Did you hear about the $43 trillion record-setting lawsuit put forth by the Spire legal firm back in, what year was that? 2012, 2013?
I usually don't put much interest in claims for cash because they can argue with you forever about how much it is. Okay?
Well, it was against the mortgage fraud in the U.S.
I know. I try to go for theory, morals. You know what I mean? I want to strike down interest everywhere. I don't care how much people are going to get back. None of my business. I'm not suing for the money back. I'm suing to fix the problem. Then they can discuss what they should get back. But theoretically, let me give you an example. The big case in Canada, the Rocco Galati case against the Bank of Canada. They want to have a declaration that not using no interest money from the Bank of Canada was stupid. Now, if you look at the graphs of the Canadian national debt, you see that it was about 18 to 20 billion through most of our history up to around 1974. Then suddenly, within 10 years, the debt ain't 20 billion, it's 200 billion. And then within 10 more years, it's 600 billion. And we're now paying interest on this. How'd that happen? Well, 1974 was the year when Pierre Trudeau shut down the interest-free loan window at the Bank of Canada, which used to provide interest-free financing to the provinces and to the Canadian government to build stuff. That's what they want to do in Britain when they call it quantitative easing for the people. They want to have interest-free loans for the government to do stuff, not just give all the interest-free loans to the banks, who then loan shark it to us. Besides, if they gave it to us, we'd put it in the banks, wouldn't we? So the banks would still end up with the money in there. So that basically is what happened in 1974. So if you look at the chart of the national debt, it shoots up to around $600 billion in 20 years, and then it floats around the same thing for the next 20 years. But if you look at the debt service payments now, which used to be under $1 billion a year before Pierre Trudeau days, after Trudeau shut down that interest-free loans to the government's window, suddenly we're paying up to $25 billion a year in debt service on this $600 billion debt. And don't forget when we went through 22% interest rate days. So that means that over the last 40 years, the Bank of Canada could have saved us over $1 trillion in taxes to pay for debt service. Pierre Trudeau shutting down that window and forcing the Canadian government and the provincial governments to go borrow at the chartered banks and pay interest and tax us now to pay interest cost us over $1 billion, $1 trillion, $1,000 billion in debt service over 40 years. Now, that's just the federal government. I went and looked at the chart for the province of Ontario government. They're about 1/3 of the population of Canada. And guess what? In 1974, their debt started to grow in exactly the same way. And now they owe $400 billion and have paid over the last 40 years almost $300, $400 billion in debt service too. Now, Quebec is about the same size as Ontario, about 1/3 of Canada, and I would bet they have the same curve. And then the other 8 provinces, or another 1/3 of Canada population, I would bet they have the same curve. So what I'm saying is that because Trudeau shut down the interest-free loan window at the Bank of Canada, Canadians have been taxed over $2 trillion to pay for the federal and the provincial debt we wouldn't have had to pay for. Which means that if you divide $2 trillion by the 30-some million Canadians, if Pierre Trudeau hadn't done that, it would be like putting 70 grand in every Canadian's bank account. If Trudeau hadn't started siphoning the debt service in 74, it would be as if we all had an extra 70,000 in our accounts. But because Trudeau shut down the interest-free window and started taxing us to pay interest to his bankster friends, we've been sucked 70 G's apiece for every living Canadian right now. And probably around the same thing for Americans.
Yeah, I was going to say, we see a similar pattern in every country that's a member of the BIS, right?
Yes.
It's the Rothschild bankers
Yes.
That have really done a number on this planet over the last 200 years.
It's no. You got to go back 5,000 years, 6,000 years. The Babylonian Woe by David Astle is the greatest history book on money ever written, and he goes back.
Again? Say that again, John.
The Babylonian Woe.
Aha.
By
okay.
David.
I know it goes back to the Babylonians for sure.
Whoa, before. The point is that in olden days, you had these kings who used to issue clay poker chips in exchange for grain. And then the people would use the poker chips in the village and the town and the country to do their trades. And that's how money used to work. But he explains how this conspiracy of gold bullion brokers, who, by controlling international trade, could make countries want to get their gold so they could do international buys as well. And that meant that the guys who controlled the gold, which became the matter for the money, controlled the money. And the king wasn't issuing his clay chips no more, and the guys who ran the gold could pull all the gold out of circulation and cause depressions and foreclosures and stuff, or flood it with money and get them going again and investing and buying and expanding, and then cut the gold, and all of a sudden they're in depression and being foreclosed on. And they've been doing this for 5,000 years. I can tell you the greatest story ever written in the Bible. King Solomon. Wow, I'm trying to put together a novel on this story, okay? But if you want 20 minutes of the most fascinating story you ever heard, this is it. King Solomon was the richest man on earth. He had so much gold that, well, I would estimate my computations, he had about 1,000 tons, about 30,000 talents. From the estimates of what he had. Now, the point is, if you look at the...
Hey, John, can you just say what part of the Bible... Where's King Solomon in the Bible?
Oh, he would be in Chronicles. He would be in Samuel, 2 Samuel and Chronicles.
And that's the Old or the New Testament?
Old Testament.
Okay.
This is 1,000 years before Jesus.
Okay.
Now, here's the point. David, the King David... Well, he was actually quite a greedy guy because there were complaints in the Bible about him hogging all the gold, okay? And people saying, hey, where's our share? Oh, Israel, let's go back to our tents. We got no share in David's house. Well, after Solomon, now Solomon, inherited all of David's gold in his kingdom, and Egypt was weak at the time. And Solomon now ran a Switzerland of their day. Okay? People used to come and deposit money at Solomon's bank because he had 1,400 chariots, 12,000 horsemen, real good security for his bank. And then they could transfer. If they wanted to pay a guy over there, Solomon would do the transfer. And next thing you know, he was running fractional reserve banking. So he had his 1,000 tons of gold in decorations on the walls and shields, but the real money was coming in on him swapping credits in the back room based on their collateral. Now, every time people talk about governments or banks issuing money out of thin air, they don't understand that every dollar out of thin air had to be backed by collateral first. So therefore, when new money backed by collateral comes into the game, it does not dilute the old money.
Exactly.
Now, economics teaches shift A inflation all the time. Inflation is higher prices is more money chasing the goods. And it could be that. But it could also be the same money chasing less goods after foreclosure. And economics doesn't teach shift B inflation, disappearing collateral out of the cage. They only teach too many chips in the game. So everything is always inflation, too many chips in the game, and they don't even talk about disappearing collateral in the cage. So that is the big flaw in all monetary analyses out there in the world. I put up the site smartestmanonearth.ca because I'm the only guy on the planet who figured out inflation isn't more money in front of your face, it's less collateral behind your back.
Mm-hmm.
No one else in history has ever mentioned the other possibility of inflation, so I'm the discoverer of it. I was on Dragon's Den, and I explained that to them, but then they cut it off and they made fun of me, and I sued them for slander and libel, and then they had to give me the whole 15-minute videotape presentation I did, instead of the chopped up 1 minute with only 15 seconds of me. So, now to beat a copyright, I sat in front of the show and I played the video behind me and I commented and I made the tape part of my show. That's how you beat a copyright. You get in the picture. Get it? So anyway, if you want to go check it out, YouTube for Trumel, Dragon's Den, and
let's spell your name, John. How do you spell your last name?
Turmel, like turmoil, but with an E. It's a standard joke I've heard. So anyway, I was on the Dragon's Den. They didn't understand.
John, let me get you back on King Solomon. That's a fascinating story.
All right, so it's the same idea now. King Solomon was now running the biggest bank on earth.
Was he using a paper currency instead of gold?
No. He had gold and silver. He had all of it, but he didn't need it. Because people would come, they would open an account, take out a loan, but they wouldn't leave his bank with it. They'd go drop it over at the deposit section to make payments. The gold never left his vault most of the time. Okay. Like recently. Nobody used gold when it was backed by gold. They still used the paper money backed by gold at the time. Well, now they were using his IOUs within his bank. They could show up when they'd say, okay, I owe the king of Cardushania, 1,000 talents. Could you pay that, please? Sure, no problem. So he was making loans as well as taking in deposits. He was running a regular, conventional today bank then.
Charging interest,
which meant that he was making more interest off the credit in the back room than off the gold in the front room. But the gold was there just to impress everybody. That he had this much gold that he could put 1,000 tons of it just in decorations. He didn't need the gold. He almost never needed the gold for money. Nobody wanted to leave gold. Going with gold gets you mugged, but knowing you got 1,000 talents on deposit with him and you can send a little clay tablet to him to have it moved to somebody, now that's ease of finance. So he provided the world with a great banking system, but loan sharked and ripped them to shreds, but here's the thing, he hogged it all. So that when he died, his son first of all, before he died, he was making all the Israelis build his palaces and his temples. He even built a patio on a mountain called the Milo, which took 20 years of forced labor to build. Guess who was doing the forced labor? The Israelites, who didn't get anything out of the gold. Well, anyway, Solomon felt a threat from Jeroboam to his throne and tried to kill him. And Jeroboam escaped to Egypt to the protection of Pharaoh Shishak. Remember that name. Now, after Solomon died, in around 930, his son came to power, and that's Rehoboam. And so before they pronounce him king, he goes to, I think it's Shechem or whatever, and they say, look it. And now Jeroboam comes back to plead for the workers. He said, look it, we want you to cut back on the forced labor, call that taxation, and we want you to cut back on the interest rate on their debts. That's the debt by oppression, and we'll let you be king. So Rehoboam goes back and consults with the wise old elders who say, yeah, of course, cut back on the interest and forced labor, and you'll end up being king. But then he consulted with his buddies and his friends, probably worked in the banking industry with him, and said, no, we don't want to cut back on interest. We don't want to start paying taxes when they can pay it. No, go refuse them. So he went and he refused. And he said, hey, if you think my father was rough when he lashed you with the forced labor, I'm going to scourge you with scorpions. And forget about the lower interest rates. It's going to be just as bad, worse. So Jeroboam says, hey, O Israel, we have no part in the house of David. Let's get out of here. Let's all go back to our tents. And Israel took off the 10 tribes, and that's called the famous schism. when the 10 tribes went with Jeroboam and the 2 tribes stayed with Rehoboam and all the gold. Now, Rio's got all the gold, but he just lost all his infantry. Now, Shishak was the pharaoh who protected Jeroboam at the time. Shishak also being connected to Solomon because Solomon married Pharaoh's daughter. So in a sense, it's pretty likely that little kid Shishak went and spent a few summers over at Uncle Solly's place to see the richest city in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the point is, this is a real soap opera with Shishak and protecting Jeroboam after he escapes when Solomon wanted to kill him and sending him back. Well, anyway, now Shishak, in the 5th year of Rehoboam, the Bible says Rehoboam was bad and whatever, and therefore God brought a scourge and brought Pharaoh Shishak, who invaded with, what did he say? He said 1,200 chariots and 60,000 horses. Wow! And took all the fortified towns and took Jerusalem, but he didn't destroy it. He just took all the gold. So now, who is the richest person in the planet now? Well, it ain't Rehoboam. It's now Shishak.
Mm-hmm.
So which pharaoh was Shishak? They don't know. They think it was a guy named Shishak, but he was a poor guy. You think that the guy who took Solomon's treasure, plunderer of Solomon's treasure, was a poor guy? It couldn't have been Shoshank. Well, anyway, this great book by David Rohl, A Test of Time, R-O-H-L, A Test of Time. He examines the Amarna letters, and he discerns biblical characters in it. And he found that they have misdated the late Bronze Age, the Iron, by 300 and some years. And so they're looking in the Iron Age for signs of Solomon, and all they see is villages. Well, when were there big castles? 350 years before, in their chronology, when there was nothing but shepherds and judges in Israel. That doesn't make sense.
You're going awful fast here.
Okay, so I'm saying that the Egyptian chronology is off by 350 years.
Yeah, no, but who wrote about that? What was his name again?
David Rohl, R-O-H-L.
R-O-H-L. And what was the name of the book?
A Test of Time.
A Test of Time.
Funnest, best book I ever read. But here's what he didn't focus on. Now, he goes back into the Amarna letters, and he finds that they log the rise of...
Amarna letters, what are those?
The Amarna letters are the letters that were written by the flaky pharaoh Akhenaten, the guy who knocked them off their many gods to go to one god and basically didn't take care of the kingdom and lost all the colonies. Well, they got this guy listed in around 14-something when he was actually the screw-up when Saul and David built up their kingdom. You get it? It was when Akhenaten was screwing up in Egypt, playing with music and stuff and not watching his borders, that David and Saul and Solomon had their chance to build their kingdom.
And that was around 1700 BC?
No, that's about 10. That's about 1010 BC.
Oh, okay.
Okay? They were about 1400, they say Akhenaten was. But David Rohl moves them up and says David Rohl, he was at the 1010 when David took over.
Oh, okay. So I'm going in the wrong direction. You're saying it's earlier, not later. Okay.
Yeah. Gotcha. So in other words, David established his kingdom while Akhenaten was screwing up. And then, after Akhenaten gets thrown out, and David and Solomon's there, well, Pharaoh needs to make some kind of peace with Israel and the strongest, richest guy around. So he marries off his daughter to King Solomon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Now, David Rohl goes over all this, but here's the point. We know that Saul was from 1050 to 1010, and we know that David was from 1010 to 970, and we know that Solomon was from 970 to 930. That's established and proper, okay? Now, it's the Egyptian side that's off base, but when you move it down into the right place, that means you've got Akhenaten, who's the guy who screwed up when they escaped. And 80 years later, 85 years later, Shishak, who took and plundered the temple of Jerusalem, was Ramses the Great. And now you know why he was great. Because he caught the biggest gold heist in history. That's why he could build the biggest monuments and the most monuments, unlike anyone else, because he had the most gold. So
he's the one in the he's the one who's depicted in the Ten Commandments, right?
Correct. He's depicted 350, 400 years earlier against the Jews escaping Egypt, when it was actually back after Akhenaten had lost to David and Saul and Solomon. So now, here's what happened for Shishak. If you now go look at the story of Ramses the Great, in year 5 of his thing, this was in 928. This was 2 years after Rehoboam. And don't forget, Rio's still pissed off at Shishak for hiding Jeroboam, remember? So now, Shishak now comes north because Jeroboam and Israel are being attacked by the Hittites. So Ramses, or Shishak, we know it's the same, he comes north to the famous Battle of Kadesh, protecting Jeroboam and Israel. But that's when he made a mistake, got tricked by some spies, almost got ambushed, turned it around, and then out of the west came that last division, the Nerin, and we think that was Jeroboam's troops. Hey, you think if Ramses was coming to protect Jeroboam's kingdom, that Jeroboam wouldn't send along some help? So that's probably who it was. Nevertheless, it was a stalemate at Kadesh. So the Hittites were going to keep pushing on Jeroboam, and they're talking to Rehoboam to the south, who's fortifying the forts against Egypt. And if Jeroboam falls, the Hittites will probably expand right into Israel and Judah with Rehoboam. So Shishak's got a real problem when he's coming back to Egypt after being busted out at Kadesh. He went there with a couple of, maybe 20,000 troops. He might have had 1,000 or 2,000 chariots, and he lost half of them. So he's coming back to Egypt almost beaten. So how does he manage to come back at Jerusalem only 2 years later with 60,000 cavalry and 12,000 chariots and untold hordes of Cushites and Libyans and Nubians? How'd he do that? Well, here's what I think happened. It's the only way I can imagine it. And this is what David Rohl didn't go into. Ramses and Egypt probably owed King Solomon money as well. And now Rio has inherited the books. Do you think that Ramses wants to go back to Egypt, work hard to make his payments to Rehoboam? Especially when Rehoboam's planning with the Hittites to shut him out of the north? Here's what I think Ramses did. He went up to the Nubians and he said, "How much do you owe that prick, Rehoboam in Jerusalem?" "Oh, I owe him 1,000 talents. I got to bring him 100 this year." I said, "Well, I tell you what, ever since Jeroboam split off all that infantry, all the Israelis are gone. He's only got 2 small tribes. He's got his 1,200 chariots, but he's only got 12,000 horses, and there's all that gold. Why don't we broker a peace, and why don't we both go after that gold? But I'm going to go see the Nubians first and the Cushites next, okay? And let's see if we can't put together a huge coalition of debtors and see if we can go get that gold. And anybody who participates in this crusade gets a share of the gold and gets their debts to King Solomon written off. Fair enough." What do you think the king of Nubia said? Now he goes to the king of Cush, says, "What do you owe that guy Rehoboam in Jerusalem?" "Well, I owe him 1,200 talents. I got to pay him 120 this year, and I'm short." And listen, all his infantry's gone. He's got nothing but his tanks and, a few armored person carriers. Those are the horses. Why don't we join forces and go get the gold? And anybody who participates, your debts, you're going to get your markers back, and you get a share of the gold. Fair enough? What do you think he said? That is how I believe that Ramses the Great could have come back after his licking at Kadesh, stalemate. And then 2 years later, he might have come back with 500 chariots, maybe a couple of thousand horses. And then 2 years later, he comes back with 1,200 chariots and 60,000 horses and hordes of infantry. And he just sweeps over the whole place. Then he keeps going north and he kicks the Hittites out of Kadesh as well. While he had the 60,000 guys with him, he may as well go clean the job, right? So that is the link between Shishak of the Bible, who took all the gold, and they've identified him with a poor guy. And I'm saying, no. Shishak is the richest pharaoh there ever was. He must be the guy who we think is the greatest. Okay, and he is. It fits the timeline all the way back to the Amarna letters. And David Rohl proved it convincingly. So I tried to lay a bet with the bookies in Britain, but they won't take it. Because everybody keeps saying, and if you look at Wikipedia about Shishak, and David Rohl has this outlandish theory that nobody accepts, that Shishak was Ramses. Okay? Well, my only best argument is that the guy who copped the most gold probably ended up with the name greatest. So that's that great story out of the Bible about how Shishak was Ramses the Great. Neat, eh?
That's a fascinating story.
Oh, I know. It's wild. So, but the point was that Solomon and David hogged all the gold, and they oppressed all their own people, and that's why they kept revolting against the loan shark tribe. Get it?
Mm-hmm.
So, and this bit about him being the wisest man in the world. Hey, everybody's going to call the richest man in the world the wisest man in the world and want to go spend time listening and bowing and hoping for a loan, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, you do that now. Everybody glorifies the rich.
Yes. So that's the great story out of the Bible that really shook me and has fascinated me recently. But again now, Solomon did run a credit system, a real bank all over the place, and I don't know if Ramses took on that part of it. And if he didn't, that explains why his kingdom cracked up after he was gone. So anyway, but that's a great story.
So John, how did he issue them like receipts? For deposit, what sort of, was it on clay?
King Solomon?
No,
they had clay styluses and clay tablets then. He could have simply said, just give a clay check to my guy who will mail it to me and I'll exchange it from your account to his.
Okay. So it was on clay. It wasn't on parchment or something.
No. Clay chip. Clay or glass. They also used glass in Egypt. But that was, not Solomon. I think Solomon used clay and gold. So, but again, he had it all, just like today. The bankers got it all.
Oh, and what happened to that gold? Do you know who's got that gold now?
Well, I'm sure he spent it. That's what I think happened. He just spent it. It got spread out, and then the loan sharks took over 100 years ago and sucked it all back.
Mm-hmm.
A short-lived revolution, I think. But that's that story. Now, the point is, that scam of, it's interest. I don't even mind if they want to issue me the chips. I don't care whose name is on the chips, but I don't want to pay no interest for the chips. So people say that, banks should not be allowed to create money, only the government should. Well, I don't care, government or bank, who creates money. As long as there's no interest on the chips, they're going to be run the same way. So who cares? So, but anyway, that's some of the stuff that way, and that is my biggest mission is to abolish interest rates and run money like poker chips. And the software, in 1984, I financed the first interest-free, I can't say the first, but anyway, the first huge successful interest-free software program called LETS, Local Employment Trading System. And it was basically a list. People would get together, put a list of all the stuff they want to trade and stuff they want to work at online, and they could call each other and pay each other with their own IOUs. Call up the computer and say, hey, please transfer 10 credits from my account to his.
Okay, say that again. LETS. What does that stand for again?
Local Employment Trading Software or System.
Wow.
And then in 2000, after it had spread around the world, in 2000, at the Millennium Assembly, because in 1993, I ran the biggest underground casino. When they busted me, I had to spend $1 million before they took it away. So I founded a political party, ran for prime minister. I called it the Abolitionist Party in honor of the anti-debt slavery party, movement in the States. The guys who got rid of the metal chains but didn't know about the invisible debt chains. We're here to finish the job. So the Abolitionist Party, and that meant that I could go to the United Nations Millennium Assembly as a non-governmental organization. And I got in. Then I got invited to do a speech on the banking system of the future because one of the committees had a clerk who'd belonged to 3 Letzes in Australia, a single mom who'd really been helped. And she said, we got to do this big. And they invited me to do a speech. So I did the speech on Let's, how it should be a United Nations international and local employment trading system. And they passed Resolution C6 in the Millennium Declaration to restructure the global financial architecture with an alternative time-based currency. Now, the censors cut out Unilets, the name, and they cut out interest-free, its greatest feature, but time-based still means there can't be inflation. An hour's always going to have 60 minutes. But they did cut out the name Unilets, because at that time there were Letzes in maybe 30 or 40 countries around the world. Canada, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, Commonwealth places. And hang on, Windows 10 trying to load on my thing. Commonwealth places. And if they had left the Let's in there, these prime ministers would have known what was being talked about here. Instituting a time-based Let's system. That's why they cut the name and the feature out. But anyway, it's there. I can always point to it as my doing, getting on the Millennium Declaration that you should have an interest-free time-based bank account that you can pay off by working.
Well, this is a fascinating idea, John. So let's just go through it. You go pretty fast for people who've never heard of these concepts. So let's go through Let's and explain in more detail how Let's works.
Okay. Well, there are several models, but the simplest is you and a bunch of people get together. You decide that you want to form a barter network. You say that let's let one of our hours equal 12 Canadian. But a dentist can still charge 5 hours per hour. Get it? Mm-hmm. So it's like Ithaca hours in the United States. There, everybody starts with $40 in chips, and that's as simple as that. I like more the idea where people can take chips out, give a marker, like in a poker game, as many as they need to get what they need to get into production, then pay it back. I mean, big guys will take big loans to get big machines to do big jobs and make big payments, while little guys will get little loans to get little machines to make little jobs with little payments. Fine. So who cares? But so in a nutshell, it's exactly the same thing as a regular bank. You can cut checks, do all that stuff, except that you don't need to pay any interest. Now, here, imagine you know how PayPal works? Log on to the Bank of Canada PayPal. Open an account. You don't have to pledge a credit card. You can pledge 1,000 hours of labor. Now you get 12,000 Canadian put in your account. You can start cutting checks because you put up an IOU, time-based currency. And now most people would start cutting checks to people they owe, getting their debts settled, or pay off loans with interest. Now our payments go against principal. So everybody would then pay off all their interest-bearing debts below and convert them to interest-free debts at the Sugar Daddy Bank of Canada. And then after that, all your payments go against principal. And someday you're out of debt. It's the only way. If you have interest, you can never get out of debt. Some people can never get out of debt. So, no interest, you have to get out of debt. Unless you die. But with interest, some people never get out of debt. So that's basically it. You log on to the Bank of Canada PayPal, open an account, and now you got an account.
And you take, instead of banking your labor, you can actually take a loan against promised labor in the future.
Yeah, that's right. You can do both. Well, when you can either work, in which case you're now spending an earned credit, or you can just spend a credit, in which case you're going to earn it back.
Mm-hmm.
So it's as simple as that, really. It's not hard. And same thing in the States. If everybody got an account at the Fed, so they can have an interest-free loan, not just the banks, and you got yourself a working quantitative easing system. Greece, when they crashed, They talked about Plan B. Plan B was opening an online digital currency for all citizens. Well, isn't that exactly what we're talking about? Are they going to start charging interest on brand new credits? No savings? So, and Jeremy Corbyn in UK is talking about quantitative easing too. But the best examples were in Argentina. In the early 80s when they crashed, 6 Argentinian states started paying all their government employees with government bonds, small $10 bonds, which anybody would take because they could all use them to pay their taxes, hydro, medical, and licenses. So I've been promising the same thing when I run in Ontario elections. I promise I'm going to pay everybody who works for the government, and I'll get a lot of people working to keep clean and do a lot of good stuff, with bond books. And then we count up at the end of the year how much we spent, and that's how much we tax back. Now, in history, King Henry I was one of the greatest kings ever. He came up with the tally system, which was basically bonds, but uncounterfeitable. He took a stick of wood. He printed 10 pounds of gold on it. Then he split the stick in two. One half was the poker chip he could spend, and the other half was the stub. And that way he could match the grains to make sure it wasn't counterfeit. Nice, eh? So King Henry I ran an interest-free government tally system, and it stayed in operation for around 700 years before the banksters got it shut down. Nice, eh?
Kidding.
Just like we had the Bank of Canada until the banksters got Pierre Trudeau to shut it down.
Yeah, but we still didn't have private banks that loaned at no interest.
No, we want the Bank of Canada to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that'll shut the private banks down.
But I mean, before Trudeau, we still had to pay interest. And
we did, but the governments didn't.
Exactly, yeah.
And we had to pay taxes once they started paying taxes, right? Once they started paying interest, we started paying taxes, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, they certainly went up. Yeah, a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you say, 70,000 a head.
That's right.
Put out
for every Canadian alive today.
74.
Not bad. But here's what's neat. I'm an electrical engineer, remember? So just because I discovered the ripoff, because it was done by computer, I can unravel it and get you your 70 grand back. And leave the Rothschild with trillions in debts. Anyway, I can do that someday.
That would be beautiful. I'm sure you'd... have you suggested that in some of your campaigns?
Well, I've always, but I don't get on the debates. They exclude me. You think I mind losing all these things when I'm always being cheated? Come on. And no one ever talks about my interest-free money idea. No one. No reporters, no other candidates. And when you don't hear me, you don't even know what you missed, what you could have had. Sad. But that's how the system...
I have heard you in the past on I used to hear you a lot on CFRA when I lived in Ottawa.
Well, not a lot, but a little bit. Yeah, a little bit during election times or during court cases. When I was getting busted all the time. They'd make the news then, of course. But when I made them drop 4,000 marijuana charges in 2003, didn't even mention my name, a case in Toronto.
Yeah, it's very much controlled, is it not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the marijuana is also one of my programs.
Well, let's. Are you okay if we switch to that issue now? Because you've offered an extremely efficient and better way of running our banking system. I think it's great.
Yeah.
We'll get into the green currency issue in the next hour, but we can clean up our banking system a tremendous amount. I agree. No interest, service fee maybe, but no interest on banking.
Just like a casino. They'll take a rake off out of the chips that are created, but they don't ask for chips they didn't create.
Well, yeah, I like the analogy. It works for me.
You know what's interesting, though? If you were to pay your interest up front, then your debt is payable. But if you leave your interest to the end of the contract, it becomes impossible. Here's how it works. When you borrow $100 at a bank, you're not getting somebody else's deposit. It's out of the tap, brand new chips. Let's say you got your 100 chips. You're going to owe 110 at the end of the year. If you pay the 10 to the banker right now, that money is not retired from circulation. He has it to spend, and you can earn it back. But when you make a payment against principal, those chips are retired to the cage. They're gone. So, if you were to pay all of your interest up front, now you have a year in which to earn that 10 back, so you have the 100 to pay the full $100 in debt. Isn't that sneaky? Isn't that wickedly, wickedly deceptive? It seems so payable and simple if you explain it that way, but if you get behind, oh, I can't pay 110 with only 100. You got to pay the 10 up front to avoid the mortgage death gamble. So I just wanted to get that point in there before we moved along.
Well, that's not an option, though, is it?
Well, I think it is. If you were to simply do it, okay, say, hey, can I pay all my interest up front, please? And if everybody did it, now here's the point, nobody else will do it. So you got to get in competition with guys who are going to be short on chips trying to gouge yours. But if they had done the same thing, then no one would be needing to gouge anybody because there's enough for everybody. Mm-hmm. So if everybody could do it, simply paying your interest up front would mean there would be no more foreclosures. Cute, eh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah.
I like it. Okay, John, let's move on to the marijuana issue then.
Okay, well, back in 2001, after I'd been to the UN, my brother got busted growing for his sick wife and said, well, listen, time to come back to Canada and fight for your other political program to legalize drugs, legalize marijuana. And so, okay. And within...
Oh, John, okay, it's a good time to take a break. You're just starting this issue. We'll pick it up after the break. I'm with
How much
John
time have
Trumel.
I got to make a coffee?
Yeah, go have a coffee. Lots of time. We'll be back
2 minutes,
after the break,
10?
folks. Or I'm Nature and John Trumel. Welcome back to I'm Nature. I'm your host, Brian Porter. I have a most fascinating guest this evening, John Trumel. But before I get back to John, I have to put my plug in for Revolution Radio. It is the largest listener-sponsored internet-based radio system in the world. We have 2 platforms running just about 24/7, 90 different shows, folks, okay, every week. It's an incredible amount of volunteerism in spirit. We are out here trying to help everyone grow, develop a better understanding of current events, whether they're economic, political, having to do with the environmental issues, what you name it. We've got it all covered. Spirituality. We talked a lot about biblical scripture. We have a guy named Dr. Truot. This guy is a biblical scholar of immense proportions. He's on Fridays at 10. One of my favorite shows. There's other shows I really like on this network. You can get access to them all through an archive for $5 measly a month, folks. I strongly recommend that people subscribe to these archives and help Revolution Radio stay on the air. Okay. So, here we are, back with John. I think, John, I heard him playing with his mic. I think he's back with us.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. Get a little closer. I can barely hear you.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. You got your coffee, John?
Yeah.
Okay. I think before we go on to the cannabis issue, I just want to tie this into something. I watched you on another program, and you mentioned the Japanese post office. Are they running like a Let's system in Japan through their post office?
I don't know about the post office. That's the first time I've heard of that. They have a system called Furiyu Kipu, or Furiya Kipu, and it is a way of banking healthcare hours so that you can get them back later when you're sick.
Oh, that's what it is. Oh, I thought it was a labor sharing system.
Well, that's a labor sharing system, but it's health care in particular.
Yeah, okay, but it's not universal.
Well, yeah, but the point is I can give you a 1 hour health care hour for an hour of something else, can't I?
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that idea. I just thought
That's
it
right.
was more universal in terms of the way it worked. John, I can barely hear you. You got to get closer to your mic.
All right, okay. How's that? Better?
Did
No, that's funny. I'll
you
hold it.
switch mics or something?
No, I didn't. I'll just tinkle with this a little bit. Maybe it'll come across better.
Okay, maybe it's just maybe I turned down the sound a bit. Mine, that might be it. Okay, if you're set up right, then it should be fine.
Okay.
Okay, so let's get on to your activism around cannabis. And, you told me off air that you got 400,000 charges, 4,000 charges dropped in
Yeah.
one case.
Yeah, in 2003. In 2000, the Parker decision came down and said that you have to have a working exemption in order to be able to prohibit Terry Parker from using marijuana. So we are declaring that there is no prohibition absent a working exemption. We're going to suspend our decision a year to give the government a chance to come up with an exemption system for Terry Parker.
So Terry Parker was using marijuana for medicinal purposes and then got charged?
Epilepsy, correct.
Oh.
So the judge stayed his charge, and now the government appealed. And the Court of Appeal ruled that he had a right to his marijuana. And like I said, they struck down the law. They say we declare the possession offense in Section 4 invalid. Mm-hmm. And then they suspended the decision for a year. Now, after that year was up, just on the day before, the government handed down the MMAR exemption system in 2001. But Terry, everybody was supposed to now run around, go get specialists and, get exempted. My point was the Terry Parker, poster boy for the order, he wasn't exempted on August the 1st. They did not exempt the poster boy on time. So as far as I was concerned, the law came down for everybody, and I started dancing. But anyway, now the government's not going to admit this. You got to get a judge to tell them. So, but what happened was they came up with an extension of time, 6 months for people to go out and get their doctors, and most people were running out. But after 6 months, Terry Parker hadn't been able to complete his forms. So I wrote him a motion to declare that the prohibition on marijuana is invalid because it didn't protect him on time, or that the court's exemption that they granted him for the year be extended, because they'd said we suspend for a year, but we give you an exemption to protect you at least. The other epileptics can die, and 1,500 of them. So anyway, I wrote him the motion that he can ask for an exemption or the law struck down. Well, when we get to court, the Crown ain't there, which is a funny story. Seems the clerk didn't believe that he served it right and didn't pass it along right, and now they were left out. But nevertheless, we have this judge up there, Judge Pitt, and he sees proof of service. Yeah, there's a signature of the Crown. They got the document. So he says, well, okay, I don't know what to do. And Terry says, well, my thing expires tomorrow and I'm unprotected, so I want the law declared dead because I'm not protected. Or extend it. He says, okay, I'll do something by today. So later in the afternoon, he sent a fax that said, I extend the protection of the Ontario Court of Appeal to Terry Parker for until the government's complied with the Parker Court order. Well, I said, wow, here's our first judgment that the government hasn't complied on time, and they ran out of time. So anyway, I want to go for a declaration using that decision. So Terry knows Alan Young, the lawyer in Toronto. So we go visit Alan Young and say, we want you to go and ask the court to strike down the law because this judge said they haven't complied with Parker on time. And Alan Young says, no, I'm working on another case to try and repair the MMAR. And I'm saying, if you repair the MMAR, won't that bring the law back to life? Isn't the fact it's busted the reason that it's dead for all of us? Why would you want to work on fixing the MMAR? Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, Alan Young had his idea. He wanted to work on fixing the MMAR. So
John, what does MMAR stand for?
Marijuana Medical Access Regulations.
Okay.
And so anyway, I did a motion to declare the law unconstitutional and no force in effect because of what the judge said. And as we go to our hearing, we get tied up with the Alan Young case to try and fix the exemption. So we're saying we want a declaration the law is dead because the exemption's dead, and we got Alan Young coming along trying to fix the exemption. So anyway, at the Court of Appeal, they do, because there's another guy named JP, a kid who was busted in 2002 in Windsor with a couple of joints. But his lawyer filed a motion saying that, A, because the exemption was flawed, there's no charge. I want my charge against my client quashed. So anyway, the judge agreed and quashed it. And then the Superior Court agreed and quashed it. And they appealed. But in the meantime, now we have our case in civil in front of Letterman, where we're trying to get this decision that they ain't complied with the law. He agrees they haven't complied with the law, but then gives them 6 more months to do it. Whoa. It's already been dead a year. You can't give them another 6 more months like pretending they ain't missed their deadline. But he did. He did. And that's what the government wanted. And that's what Alan Young had provided them with by doing that. Now, at the Court of Appeal, the very day they dropped JP's charges, and we now know that the law was dead for the last 2 years. At the same time, the courts say with the Hitzig decision, Alan Young's case, we have now struck these flaws and now it's workable, so the law is alive again. So on the very day Canadians found out that the law was dead for the last 2 years because the exemption hadn't worked, on the very same day Alan Young got it working to keep the law alive. Mm-hmm. He's one of our MedPot champion lawyers, by the way. You ever heard of Alan Young?
No.
Really? Oh, yeah. Well-known, famous, always on TV. He's our hero. And he's the guy who went in there, and when we proved the law was dead, he's the guy who fixed the MMAR so the court could say we brought it back to life. Now, we argued later on in appeals that courts can't bring laws back to life. Only Parliament can do that. But Professor Young had been on TV telling Canadians that the court had resurrected the prohibition. Who's going to listen to little old me, right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, now the law is back alive. But in December, they had to either repeal. Instead, they chose to drop all 4,000 remaining charges, remaining possession charges. So I'm the guy who filed the appeal that allowed all that to happen. And if me and Terry hadn't filed an appeal, none of that would have happened. So those 4,000 charges, they're on our scorecard. Now, at the same time...
Wow, that's an amazing accomplishment, John.
Yeah, it was neat. At the same time now...
let me just explain to the listener. You don't charge for your services.
No, I just do it for the fun. I just do it because I like beating up on government.
Yeah. And you're not a trained lawyer, but you're in there duking it out with them.
Let's face it now. I got an edge. I use mathematics, game theory to figure out what's fair. You know, they use trial and error. I use math. Can you compare the two? So that's why. Anyway, law is mainly learning how to write the right forms and go to the right court. Other than that, it's just laying out your case, and that's not so hard. Most people can do that pretty well. When I steer my self-defenders into the right court, they usually acquit themselves very well. So anyway, here we are now. Alan Young got these 2 flaws struck down in the MMAR that made it unconstitutional. One was that you could only have 1 patient per grower, very uneconomical. And you could only have 3 growers per garden, very uneconomical. So they struck those caps. Now you could have as many growers and as many patients as you wanted. But 2 months later, Health Canada went and put those 2 caps back. The 2 flaws that had caused the MMAR to be declared invalid and the period of invalidity where those 4,000 charges were dropped, they went and put the same 2 flaws right back in. So Alan Young starts another case to strike down the same flaw he previously struck down in the Svetkopoulos decision. And in 2008, they struck down the law again. But notice, this time we didn't have McAllister and JP, McAllister being a lawyer, asking that since there's a bad exemption, no offense. Alan Young never asked in Hitzig. Parker said without an exemption, there's no offense. He didn't ask. Again, in Svetkopoulos, he went and proved there'd been a bad exemption, but he forgot to ask to strike down the CDSA. Again.
You're losing me here, John.
The story, you mean? Okay. Well,
yeah, you're going too fast. You're going too fast, and you're throwing all
but you remember Parker? The Parker decision said that you have to have an exemption to have a prohibition. When Alan Young proved in Hitzig that there was a bad exemption, he didn't ask for no prohibition. But another guy had asked and won it. So when there's a bad exemption, there's no offense. You get your charges quashed. JP. So in 2008, Alan Young again went and proved the bad exemption. And again, he didn't bother asking to strike down the CDSA prohibition. But now we didn't have anybody else to ask. Now, in BC, another case, the Barron decision. And they, too, struck down the same two flaws as Alan Young had struck down. And instead of asking to quash his client's charges, Kirk Tusaw just proved that there'd been a bad exemption, and he forgot to get his charges quashed, like JP has his charges quashed. Every time these lawyers prove a bad exemption, they always forget to ask for no offense, like McAllister had. So now, same thing with Smith at the Supreme Court of Canada last year. The Supreme Court of Canada ruled that not letting people use other than dried forms of marijuana violated their rights. And it really did. It's misuse. They weren't letting people use it the right way. They had forced everybody to only smoke dried. Therefore, that did violate their rights in a very deadly way compared to not enough growers. Get the difference? If not enough growers and patients per grower are flaws serious enough to make the MMAR unworkable, what about an order that doesn't let you use the pot right? Yeah. So we have now made a motion, and it's in 7 provinces right now. Let's see, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, Alberta, and BC. And we have a motion to quash, which says just like JP got his charges quashed when he proved there had been a bad exemption, we are now claiming the Supreme Court of Canada decision in Smith declaring a worse exemption means our charges should be quashed all the way back to 2001 because the dried only has been since the beginning. So we've been having judges duck this motion all over in Quebec, like 8 different judges have all ducked. And this is supposed to be like fixing a typo. First judge you run into. And they keep putting it off. And so anyway, the point is that is the Allard case. You can now I have a site, johntrumel.com now /kits, KITS. There you will find the kits that I've developed for use in criminal and civil court. In the criminal, it's called the Quash Kit. It's called the Allard Kit with all the documents. It's about 20 pages long, but it allows you to ask to have your charges quashed because of the recent Smith and Allard decisions. Now, the Allard decision, that's what we're going to spend a lot of time now. That's something that happened recently. Now, my brother is a grower.
What does KIP stand for, John?
KIP? Kit. K-I-T-S.
Oh, kits. Oh, okay.
Like a mechanic's kit.
Right, okay.
A kit of papers, I called it.
I thought it was KIPs. Okay,
no,
kits.
Kits.
Right.
Kits. So anyway, no one is ever going for bad exemption, no offense. We acronym it BNO. Okay? I should have said absent exemption, no offense, because those are the judge's words, but anyway, I put bad. Nevertheless, that's being raised in many different. Now, let me give you an example. We had James Turner. He was busted in 2006, growing 2,879 plants. Probably one of the biggest busts in Ontario. And he used my kits to fight his charge for 9 years. They finally had him come to court this year. And in January 2006. Now, he filed the Allard motion and the Smith motion last year, August, right after the decision in June. And the Crown ducked it 4 times. Kept putting it off, making up stories. Finally, they've got a date for trial. And 1 month before that, they announced they're withdrawing the charges against his 2,879 plants. Not enough chance of conviction.
Wow.
Okay, so we don't have any victories where a judge said the law is dead because of the bad exemption. Yet. We have past ones where they've said that, but not yet with our new one. We've had charges withdrawn. We've had sweet plea deals, but no judges actually. So we've had many wins, but they're not official wins. But more and more people are filing the kits. If they got friends in trouble, just file this and your Crown's going to start talking a deal.
Now, this chap with the 2,800 plants, was he doing it, was he supplying people for medicinal reasons, or was it for his own personal use or for...
I have no idea, but I would presume he was hoping to make some kind of profit, but I don't care.
Yeah.
It was legal as far as I'm concerned.
Well, yeah, I mean, okay, that's
Parker
something I wanted to ask you, John. You're aware of all... Has anything actually changed since the new Trudeau got into power with respect to the marijuana laws and health laws?
No. He's as much of a disappointment as his father. So his father promised, he was going to legalize, had his big commission and reneged, and you wait till it comes out. There'll be a lot of screaming. But anyway, no, he's been no help at all. Now, here's what happened with the growers. That's made the news. Not the whole story. You ain't got the whole story in the mainstream media. So, my brother was a grower. He had his license now. He finally got it. And in 2013, the government announces they're shutting down all grow-ops, forcing everybody onto licensed producers. And, of course, grow-ops are making it at $1 or $2 a gram, and the licensed producers are charging 10 to 15. Wonderful situation. So anyway, some lawyers in BC, Kirk Tousaw and John Conroy, start an action for the marijuana, the MMAR extension people. They want the MMAR extended. Now, we want it struck down, because if the MMAR and the MMPR, the new one, are struck down and there's no exemption, we know there's no offense.
Right.
So
what's this extension involve?
Well, it's a judge can say, I extend your permit.
Okay.
So anyway, here we are now. Everybody's permits are expiring on April the 1st. They've been ordered to shut down. They got their order 6 months earlier. Most people, when their permit expires, they shut down their grows. But on April the 21st, on March the 21st, there's a motion in front of a federal court judge to extend their licenses because the MMPR isn't ready for them.
Yeah.
If the MMPR wasn't ready for them, why extend the MMAR? It's going to save the prohibition. If the MMPR wasn't ready, on April the 1st, the prohibition would die. The Parker decision says if you got a bad exemption, you got no offense. Well, here they are admitting they got a bad exemption, so much so that the patients are demanding to have the old regime back. Well, I don't want the old regime back. I want them both dead. Then the law's dead with it. So, by these patients being suckered into filing a motion to extend the life of the old regime, marijuana exemption regime, it also extended the life of the prohibition they were worried about. Got it?
Mm-hmm.
Wild, isn't it? The rubes. But anyway, These are the lawyers. Why would Alan Young want to fix the MMAR to bring the law back to life? But he did. Why would John Conroy
Well, he wants cases, John. He wants cases to fight in court.
No. These screwed everybody. We would have had repeal for the country if he hadn't won that exemption extending the MMAR while the MMPR was unready. Right? Right. He could have won for the whole country. Instead, he saved the government. Wow, what a lawyer for our side. John Conroy, our hero. So, it's been extended. But the judge pulls a sleazy. One of the dirtiest sleazies I've ever seen. There are about 36,000 exempted growers out there. All right?
Mm-hmm.
He announces, I extend all the grow permits back to October 1st. But I'm only going to extend the possessed permits back to today. So Robert Roy, whose possessed permit expired on the date of the hearing, the 21st. Next day it's expired. 2 days later the judge says, I extend everybody who's still alive. Sorry, Robert. You don't get your meds no more. As a matter of fact, approximately half of the renewals took place in that 6 months, and half in the next 6 months.
So let me just make sure I understood this, John. You're saying that the people who are growing it got a 6-month extension?
No. Everybody got an announcement on October 1st that your grow ops will be invalid on April the 1st. April Fool, 2014.
Yeah.
2 weeks before that, on the 21st, there's a motion to extend the MMAR, the original regime, pending the new one working, which ain't ready.
Yeah.
Now, I already mentioned, if they hadn't done that and the new one wasn't ready, the law would be dead. But by extending the MMAR, they kept the prohibition alive. So then everybody has that 6 months now. Everybody who expires in that 6 months now, they're not going to put in a garden for another month, will they? They're not going to reapply for another month till it expires for everybody on April 1st. Robert Roy expired on March the 21st. Is he supposed to renew until April the 1st? So that he would have been alive 2 days later when Manson said, oh, the only people who can keep growing and using their grow permits are people with valid possessed permits as of today. So the judge managed to give the impression everybody's grow permits were extended while cutting off 18,000 people. Got it?
Mm-hmm.
18,000 people, licenses, the judge cut. But it didn't make the news because he extended everybody's grow permits, whether expired or not, back to October. But then the possessed permits, only the ones that weren't expired kept going. But you need a possessed permit to have a grow permit. So all those grow permits he extended to the people whose possessed permits he didn't extend
were
useless.
A possessed permit and a grow permit?
Yeah, there are two. Some people don't need a grow permit.
Okay. I think I got it. So you continue on this case. It's
all right.
Yeah.
Well, my brother was one of those growers threatened. So I said, okay, I'm going to start an action, and I'm going to try and shoot down the MMAR for all its flaws and the MMPR for all its common and new flaws.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the meantime, you got the John Conroy Allard case started, and now I start mine. But mine is a self-defender, okay? We all do it ourselves. I'm not a lawyer. So, next thing you know, we got 25 people who've filled out a statement of claim and filed. We want the same relief as Allard. We want declaring the regimes unconstitutional, except we want the MMAR struck down too. They want it extended. So We're not quite the same. And they wanted exemptions. We wanted exemptions. But they didn't. We wanted for personal medical use. They didn't say that. And so theirs got shot down because they had no limits. And then the judge used them getting shot down to shoot ours down, even though we had a limit. Neat, eh? That was Judge Phelan's decision. Anyway,
But John, okay, John, let me just get this out here. So it's John Trumel Gold Star Team is this Facebook site to file.
No, John Trumel, just John Trumel at Facebook.
Yeah, John Trumel
at Facebook.
But is it not Gold Star Team? Don't you have a site?
Well, yeah, there's one team put up by a supporter called Gold Star Team, and we have Team Gold Star at another place. But I mean, if you want to see what's happening, I cross post everything to Facebook.
Okay.
So that's why everything is there.
Are you at your limit in terms of friends on Facebook?
No, not yet.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
All right.
So anyway, now back to what happened here. So we've now filed our motions. We want to strike down both regimes. We want a declaration, repeal, Beano, law's dead. And so the Crown makes a motion. Now, here's the thing. The Crown has 30 days to file a statement of defense. They do against Allard and then go on with their happy, long, expensive discussion and case. But with us, they don't file a statement of defense. So we got a right to move for summary judgment. Instead, they file a motion to stay our actions because the Allard decision will solve 4 of our 20 problems.
Mm-hmm.
Substantial overlap is what Judge Phelan called 4 out of 20. I guess he doesn't have much clue as to the meaning of the word substantial. But anyway. You can't believe the yucks in these
20%.
4 out of 20, and he called it substantial overlap. Okay? So he stayed all of our actions. Now, we included stuff that they didn't ask for. We asked to strike down the prohibition. They didn't.
Yeah.
And when it was raised, the Crown said, they didn't put it in the notice. They can't do it. Well, it was in mine, but I'm stayed. Wasn't that handy for the government? That Phelan stayed us so he could go deal with the other one and then tell them, sorry, I can't give you that remedy that I know Trumel asked for and is going to be coming at me for. I can't give it to you because you didn't ask. Anyway, but back to the case. So now here we are. They stayed ours. We had a huge hearing in 12 courtrooms across 10 provinces. With about
simultaneous?
200. Pardon?
Simultaneous? Here?
Simultaneous. I call it the big event. April 29, 2014. In 10 federal courthouses in 10 provinces, 12 courthouses in 10 provinces.
I've never heard of such a thing.
Well, anyway, it was the Crown said it was unprecedented and it was extraordinary and another word, So yeah, it was unusual to see 270 self-represented people all in court together. So they put on this big event to stay their actions. Now what's neat is the Crown has made it. Now that Allard is finished and has won certain things for us, now the Crown makes a motion to dismiss our actions, saying we got everything we wanted, okay? And anyway, and they want to do it in writing with no live hearing. So they have a live hearing.
What did the Allard case do for you, brother? What did they help? How did they help your case?
Well, all they did was we asked for a declaration that the MMAR and the MMPR were invalid, flawed.
Yeah.
They asked for a declaration that the MMPR was flawed, as they wanted to extend the MMAR. So that was the only similarity, and they asked for an exemption with no limit. We asked for an exemption for personal medical use, which the judge said was the same no limit. That's Phelan again. I tell you, a lot of yucks there. So anyway... Oh, you can't believe. Don't forget, the Crown comes up with these doofus arguments, and the judge has to adopt them because there's nothing else. And he's got to say, I agree with the Crown, that 4 out of 20 is a substantial overlap. Anyway, he's going to be laughed at the rest of his career someday. So they'll get punished someday. Not counting the people who died. I mean, David Shea. He's a guy out of Nova Scotia. He died of cancer while his action for his exemption was stayed by Phelan.
Mm.
Okay, Phelan's got a lot of blood on his hands. So it doesn't matter killing a lot more people now when he's already got the first few dead ones, right?
Yeah.
Right. So that's where we are now. We got a judge who's already killed people, and they don't care about killing more.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, the point is I can count. It's about 60 statistically. If one out of 300 croaked, well, out of 18,000, you'd expect 60, right?
Yep.
Oh, anyway, the point is someday they're going to come up and say, Mr. Phelan, here are the names of the people who died while you had stayed their action. Yeah, I can't wait to throw that in his face. He deserves it. But anyway, it's Phelan and Manson, these two judges with all the blood on their hands. Oh, the other ones above will let them do it too, okay?
Well, so, John, where are things at now with this action?
Well, right now, now it's gone on. First of all, there was an appeal of the Manson decision cutting off the left-outs, okay? And I got about 200 more people join my application for interim exemptions out of those left-outs who got cut off. Robert Roy, Stephen Burt, lots of them joined and started our fight as on their own. But in the meantime, we had all these people.
John, just a quick point. You're cutting out here and there.
Is
there an issue with your mic? Did you change something?
No, I didn't. But I'll just sort of pull a little head of my shirt here. Better?
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, let me go back to where we were. We've started our actions. We've been stayed. And now here comes the Manson decision. He cuts half the people. There's an appeal. And then John Conroy discontinues the appeal. Says, I want to go back and ask Phelan again. And Phelan said, I got no right to overrule a guy who's my peer. So Conroy discontinued the appeal for the 18,000 to the right court to go to the wrong court. Now, the Allard decision and case finally gets heard, and it comes down. And the judge doesn't change anything. So what does John Conroy do again? Well, first of all, I'll tell the Allard story. The judge decides that the regime is so lousy and so unworkable, he's striking it down in its entirety.
And which regime is that?
The MMPR, the latest one.
Okay.
But as usual, he says, okay, now, I'm going to suspend my decision for 6 months, and we're going to pretend that the sick people are being taken care of and not dying, so that the government has 6 months to come up with a new regime that'll keep them alive. But in the meantime, we'll just pretend it works.
Another new regime.
Yeah, it's coming up on August the 24th. The judge ordered a new regime to allow self-growers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, maybe they're going to just say 6 plants each. You don't know what these government grumblings are going to do to hurt the patients. But they have to come up with a new regime in August.
Of
2016. Yeah, August 24th. So in the meantime now, with the Allard decision, that proves that the exemption was unconstitutional. So we don't have to do that. The Crown's reason for staying us came true. They've won it, so we don't have to win it. But now the Crown is saying that since you won it, now we want to throw out your case. Now, the interesting point is this. Justice Phelan whacked the Crown with the costs for the Allard case. They raised $250,000 from supporters. And now the whole $250,000 goes back to one guy, Jason Wilcox. Now, he doesn't want to give it back. So he hired John Conroy to go and ask to get the exemptions for the left-outs extended again back to Phelan, the judge who said he had no power, just to waste money. And that's what they're doing now. They got all this supporter money that's been covered by the government, and they don't want to give it back. And they got to find ways to spend it. So, but that's the Allard, Conroy, and the rubes being taken. But in the meantime now, back to us.
Yeah.
We now have the Allard case is over. And so I make a motion now the government makes a motion. Says now that it's over, we want to make a motion to throw out all their claims as settled or frivolous or vexatious or whatever insults we can throw at these non-lawyers. No shit, that's how it works. So so now, and I respond, and the judge says, okay, I'll let you do this motion, even though you never filed a statement of defense, you're in default, I'll let you file a motion, and then we'll give them 30 days to answer. And the government asked, listen, there's 300 of these people. Is it okay if we email it out to them, please? And the judge went, okay. Well, I wrote in, I said, hey, there's 300 of us. Is it okay if we may email in our stuff? And he said, no. Now, I said, you want me to get 300 people running around the province filing the same response to this waste of time the Crown just filed here? I'm not going to do it. I said, I'm going to respond. The judge writes back and says, you have no right to represent the others. And I say, I'm not representing the others. I'm just going to be the only guy who opens his mouth. Now, if he wants to dismiss everybody's cases because they didn't file a standard form, I said, everybody, that's when I put up a kit, then we all go to the appeal. He wants to pull a dirty move. He's going to do it even if we all filed anyway, wouldn't he?
Right.
I'm filed. I filed yesterday. I'm in. I have made arguments rebutting all the Crown's stupid points. And the judge has no reason for granting any dismissal of any claims. Let's face it, Allard didn't ask for damages. We did. And they're saying, oh, you can't ask for any damages unless there's bad faith. Well, Allard proved your guy lied in evidence. You guys shut down my grow-op because of your concern for fires, and there'd been none. You got it? Their concern for fires is one of the reasons the MMPR shut down my brother's grow they wanted to do. John, and there had been no fires in 12 years.
John, yeah, let me just ask a question here. Are you using marijuana for medical purposes?
All marijuana use is for medical purposes. My action is I have no illnesses. I want to use it to prevent what it's good for once you got it before I get it.
Exactly. Preventive
medicine. And for its benefits. And I mentioned in particular to the judge neurogenesis. University of Saskatchewan says it grows new brain cells, which is why I'm so sharp and the judge is so dull.
Well, there's also some research that shows that our DNA is so compatible with this stuff, it's not fun.
Yeah, but don't forget, the guys we're talking to
have evolved using this stuff.
The guys we're talking to haven't been growing any new brain cells.
Yeah.
Just keep that in mind. As a matter of fact, they're probably alcoholics destroying them at full rate.
Mm-hmm.
They're the alcoholic generation. Older guys with money, right?
Yeah.
They can afford to get drunk, not get down into the illegal drugs like those people expanding their brain cells. So anyway, back to the story now. So now the Crown is now trying to throw out all of these guys. But in the meantime, because of what Allard did, I say we don't have to prove the constitutional arguments no more. They did it. So I'm going to redo the statement of claim, and I'm only going to leave in an exemption and damages. I'm going for summary judgment for repeal. Okay? Once the Crown made the motion to stall everybody or to kill everybody, I know I got a right to make a motion for summary judgment because I didn't file a statement of defense. So I did. And then the judge says, oh, you can't do that. You have to file a motion to lift the stay that the Crown said was expired. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's pretty silly, but I did it. I filed a motion to lift the expired stay. And Judge Phelan granted the motion to lift the expired stay. The only purpose was to stall me so the Crown could catch up. Because he didn't make them lift the stay. He made me lift the stay. Get it?
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, like I say, Phelan's been doing this all along. The government get to do all their arguments in the back room by fax. Don't have to file motions. The rules say you must do this by motion. Phelan lets them file a letter. They can't do a motion because they didn't file a statement of defense. Remember, they're not an official defendant. They're in default. So Phelan has to find another way to let them make their cases. So just write me letters to the back room. I'll just hand down directions, even if it says you got to do it by way of notice. Oh, if you can't do it by way of notice of motion because you had no statement of defense, well, I may as well find something else for you, is what he did. So they've got this going on. Judges jerked me around. But nevertheless, he's now got my motion for summary judgment, And I'm not asking for it in writing, but the judge is already, now here's the point. It says in the rules, when they ask for a motion in writing, if you object, put your objection in your response. Okay, well, I'd already written a letter to the judge saying I object. But anyway, I have just filed my response yesterday, or was it today? Yesterday. And when I get home, I get an email from the judge, and it's a direction, and it's telling me, where was the joke there? Senior moment here. Oh.
You get emails from the judge.
I should open it up. It must be lying around here somewhere. It said, first of all, I can't represent the other people. And I said I'd be the only guy talking. That no reason not to be in writing, which means that he wants to be able to shut all the people down without a live hearing. And I forget the last point, sadly. So anyway, that's where we are right now, I'll remember it, I think, trying to get our hearings in for a live hearing right now. Oh, that was the point. I've now converted the statement of claim down to a new 5-pager. All it says is that the Allard decision ruled that there'd been a bad exemption. That bad exemption shut me down. I shut down on March 21st, and I've been shut down till August 24th. Throwing 90 days to get back up, I've been down 800 days. I had a prescription for 20 grams a day. I was paying $1 a gram my own costs. Now I got to pay 15. That's $14 more per gram times 20, 280 a day times 800 days extra I had to pay out or do without. And I'm claiming for that. Got it?
Yeah.
And that's it. The unconstitutional regime put my cheap grow out of business. I want damages for what it cost me. Now, there's no more connection to Allard other than Allard declared the regime unconstitutional. There's no way they can throw this out like they're going to attempt to do the link with Allard for us to be thrown out. So, right now, I am advising people to get signed up if you were a permit who got cut off and stake your claim for damages. I'll be going to the LIFT convention Friday, Saturday in Toronto, where I will be showing people how to sign up. It costs $2 to make a federal court statement of claim against the government. $2.
The LIFT convention, what does that stand for? What's LIFT stand for?
What?
LIFT.
I don't know.
Okay.
But it's a Toronto Convention Center. It's a famous marijuana convention for this year.
Okay, yeah. So Marijuana Rights Convention.
Yeah. I will be there basically signing people on, showing them how to upload their application to the federal court online registry as we go. So I hope to sign up 50 or 100 people and have people helping me the whole time I'm there. So, if there are a lot of newbies demanding only damages, it'll be pretty tough for Phelan to explain why he threw out my guys asking for damages just because they also asked for the declarations of invalidity. And finally, the Crown asks for costs, wants to hit us with costs. I said, look how come when the Crown lost the declarations in Allard, they had to pay, and now when they lose the declarations over here, they want us to pay? It's amazing, isn't it? The yucks never end once you realize it, you know. You're not dealing with guys who were good in math. Okay, lawyers were always the bottom of the barrel. They were the bright kids who couldn't add. You know what I mean? It's sort of like not autistic, but anyway, not completely stupid, but not good enough to get into math. So those are the lawyers. And the stories I have for lawyers are really funny, but you've heard some right here today. What can I say? Guys who, anyway. And that's where we are right now.
I think you're amazing. The facility you've developed to go into these courts and to fight is just amazing. I'm really impressed.
Yeah, it's cute. It's
Plus,
new.
You've gone into 88 elections on top of that. I mean, you're really the Energizer Bunny. I think you should be in the world, the Guinness Book of Records.
I am. 1997.
1997.
That's for the most elections contested.
No, but a guy, I can't imagine, I don't know anyone who's done as much as you have in terms of activism on this planet. I mean, you really have an amazing
Yeah, but I had an
efficiency
edge.
with your activism. It seems like you can do anything you want. I mean, I'm not saying you win all the time, but you really are. I mean, Galati gets paid for
Yeah.
what he does.
I have an edge, though. Being a professional gambler, I am free to do everything else with my spare time, and I'm the best in the world. You know what I mean? I can play 1,000 hours in a year and pay for everything, including elections and everything.
And
So I've been given a free ride through life in a sense, which means that it's pretty easy for me to be. Look at they can fire other people, they can go after their jobs, they can harass them, whatever, break them. Me, I sort of live off the land, so they really can't hurt me. I don't have anything. I don't have any possessions they can take. I got nothing to lose, and that's the worst kind of enemy.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you don't have to pay taxes on the income you earn from gambling?
Well, I'm supposed to, but come and get it. Way back in, I think it was 1984, when I had that other big session, I said, look, if you guys want to take my taxes and go spend it on debt service when you don't have to, that's like having a bonfire on Parliament Hill, and I ain't contributing. Simple as that. And it just so happens that income tax is about how much we pay in debt service. Well, I can't stiff sales taxes. I want my product, but I can stiff income taxes. So come and get me if you want it. Yeah. But then like I say, I got nothing they can grab, so I'm pretty invulnerable in that sense. And, when I sued CBC's Dragons Den, geez, I must have owed them 25, 30 G's, but they haven't tried to collect, Anyway.
So you basically, you have a cash economy that keeps you going?
Well, yeah, okay. Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
Plus, I don't live expensive, okay? My rent and a bit of food. I don't eat expensively either, The only real expenses are elections and travel, and paper and toner. So, but God, comes through when I need him, so there's no problem so far. Plus, this year I turn 65 and I start getting a pension. Watch me go now.
Are you sure you qualify if you haven't paid taxes?
Yeah, everybody qualifies for the minimum.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, neat, Hey, I paid more sales tax than most people. Than anyway, I paid my share.
I'm not saying you shouldn't get it. I know myself that I
yeah.
so little into CPP that they told me I was going to get half the normal amount.
Oh, well, I think there's a minimum number you got to get. There's a living income supplement or something, and mine hasn't settled in yet. I'm not worried. They always send, if they're late, they'll send it anyway.
You sound like you're going pretty strong for 65.
Well, listen, I'll give you a few minutes on health, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Mind-blowing stuff. I heard about the Dr. Joel Wallach, Wallach, and he was talking about how a Harvard Medical School study had 60 guys with severe arthritis needing joint replacement surgery, and 30 of them were given an ounce of gelatin a day. Jello, okay? An ounce of gelatin a day, and the other 30 were not. And at the end of the test, all 30 who got the gelatin got better, and all 30 who didn't got worse. Now, I've just done a video at YouTube. It's called Jello Deficiency Syndrome. I should have said gelatin, but I put Jello to make it cute. The point is that gluten deficiency, allergies, asthma, things like that, they are caused by leaky gut, which lets large particles through into the bloodstream, which must then be attacked and neutralized. Well, it seems that gelatin coats the intestine and shuts down the holes, makes them smaller, which is probably why our grandparents, who ate a lot of the gelatin with the bones and the animal and made bone soup, didn't have gluten deficiency and asthma and allergies. Wow. So that is the most mind-blowing thing I've learned recently. I have a buddy who started, and he had bad knees, and he had asthma, and he had, gluten deficient. Anyway, within 3 to 5 days, he was all agog at his knee being able to lift it up and down on his own. And I'm wondering, wow, he's going, it's a miracle.
What's he eating? He's making Jell-O every day and eating it?
No. You buy your gelatin at a butcher shop. If you buy it Knox gelatin in the stores, it's $2.80 per ounce, $100 a key. But if you buy it at a butcher, it's $20 a key. So you go buy a kilo of gelatin, lasts you for a month, and you put a big ounce, a heaping teaspoon, into your smoothie in the morning.
Okay.
That's it. Well, anyway, within 3 days, he was pumping his knee. Within 5, he was giddy. And I was saying, it's no miracle.